Before chapter 5 I uploaded my RUDY Knight theory as I believe the next chapter would reveal who the knight is. The video got some traction, at least when it comes to my channel standards, and sparked mixed reactions as expected, but I was proud of it. Like 2 weeks later chapter 5 came out and the knight's identity was hardly mentioned at all. We don't have any new info about them outside of the finale basically. But RUDY Knight has become more of a mainstream theory after the new stuff dropped regardless, and a more heated topic as well. In this video I'll try to figure out if chapter 5 made RUDY Knight more of a possibility or disproved it completely. We'll also update our tier list as a new knight theory has appeared thanks to the weird route. So think of this video as a follow-up to my RUDY video, the knight video, and the knight theories and our understanding of the character in general. Just don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a video, since I make a lot of Deltarune content here. Alright, let's go. The knight appears in the Flower King Dark World relatively late, probably many hours after it was opened by KRIS. It makes the fountain right when KRIS closes their own and kidnaps ASGORE. Flowery runs after them, so they speed up and bump their head into a wall. They have trouble standing up after that, but keep ASGORE in the huge ball. Flowery catches up to them and fights them. He attacks using fake stats, which obviously doesn't work. Flowery, seeing this, attacks normally, they clash, and the knight cuts him in half. We simultaneously get confirmation that KRIS/Fury or they/them Fury is incorrect, but it was such a good name. Anyways, yeah, that's basically all we get from the knight this chapter, like a minute-long scene. Okay, before we get to how I fit that scene into RUDY Knight, regardless of the fact that RUDY fell down before KRIS made the fountain, I wanna update the tier list with other candidates. First off, ASGORE falls all the way down to the lowest tier that is reserved for Lightners who are on screen with the knight. It's pretty obvious after chapter 5 that they can't be the knight, and in hindsight it's kinda funny he was on B before. However, ASGORE, KRIS and Susie aren't the only Lightners to enter this dark world. Mod Dummy, or Pink more accurately, is also a Lightner, a ghost that possesses a Darkner's body. And considering what happens this chapter, knowing Pink's story and the fact that there's just no evidence pointing towards her, I think she should go on F. I mean, it would be quite funny if we took the knight to Castletown, but I just don't think that's gonna be the case. Mod Dummy was absent from the original tier list because frankly I didn't even know they were in Deltarune, I admit. But yeah, she's on F now. I've yet to meet a Pink Knight believer. Also, when it comes to Vessel Knight, I didn't mention that the fountains literally are the dev's visual, and it also fades in behind the knight during their boss fight. It's also overlaid in the third sanctuary that we know is their dark world. I'm not moving them, but it was probably fair to mention that since I'm shifting towards Vessel Knight more and more with each passing day. The newest theory regarding the knight's identity, however, is that it's a fusion of KRIS and Noelle after they went into the lake in the weird route. I'm not gonna get into the details, this is not a video about it, and many people explained it way better than I ever could. But the basic gist of it is that the knight is very amalgamate-like, the lake is related to the depths, which the knight is also related to, the night fight has KRIS holding their breath, and the knight has many similarities with a Holiday family member as well as KRIS. I think it's really good, but it has some flaws, like KRIS and Noelle not knowing Gerson prior to chapter 4, or that you would be forced to do the weird route to understand why anything is happening at all, which doesn't make sense with it being obviously optional, and that you'd have to go really out of your way to land on it. So yeah, I think I'll put it on B safely, since it has a lot of evidence and counter evidence as well. Actually no, let's put it on A, since I still think the evidence outweighs the problems, which fits A tier more. And Alvin seems pretty lonely there. But this video is about RUDY, so let's maybe talk about him for a change. Could RUDY Knight theory still work? Let's think about it. After Noelle and Susie have their romantic lake scene, Carol calls her daughter to tell her that RUDY fell down. Whatever that means. That's the main part of the discourse right now. Does it mean he is dead and Toby killed him off screen, or did he just literally fall down and is in a way worse condition? Obviously, if he just died after the festival, that would disprove RUDY Knight once and for all. His death was referred to exactly the same way in the alarm clock dialogue, but we don't know anything about the state he's in at the moment. So let's assume the second option, that he's fine but injured, since I don't think RUDY would be killed off screen, just for Noelle to go away from the main characters so KRIS could make a fountain. You know what? That works better as a distraction, honestly. Carol is the one that gives out orders. If she ordered KRIS to open a fountain at ASGORE's place after the festival, she would have to do something to get Noelle away from Susie, as that could probably ruin some of their plans. I'm not saying it necessarily has to be a distraction, but wouldn't Carol be occupied with the King and Queen event? I don't know, the theory works well enough if it isn't a distraction, and I doubt it is, but I thought I'd mention it as a possibility since it came into my mind. I think even if RUDY isn't the knight, he would still be alive for Noelle to try to heal him via Dark World next chapter. Anyways, the knight appears in ASGORE's shop many hours after RUDY's accident. They also irresponsibly bump their head into a wall, which enables them to stand up, and they run away quickly after injuring Flowery. The knight running away is not anything new, they did that in chapter 4 as well, but it is interesting interesting that this trend continues, since we immediately went into battle with them in chapter 3. It looks like the knight is actively avoiding another confrontation with the heroes, which could be due to his poor health. Also, them not being agile enough to not hit their head and not being able to stand up after makes a ton of sense if Rudy was weakened by his fall. Same goes for his late appearance. Next up, let's think about what Sham told us. The shadow crystals are formed from shattered dreams. When someone has a dream and it falls apart, the crystals are what remains. After fighting the knight, we get a shadow crystal alongside the black shard. That means the knight also has to have a shattered dream of some sort. With the knight being Rudy, it would be pretty easy to assume that the dream was having a happy family that wasn't traumatized by losing Des. But that alone is not really interesting, is it? It doesn't add anything pointing us in the direction that Rudy is the one behind the mask. It's just kinda an interpretation or an assumption about the events that could or could not be the correct one. The main new evidence for Rudy Knight actually comes from the Weird Route. Rudy is the only character outside of Sans to which we can talk to in the Weird Route festival section, and his dialogue is making me raise an eyebrow. He says Susie should know that holidays are full of surprises. She then asks if they're good surprises, and he answers that it depends on which holiday. The same way his reaction to Susie in chapter 4 felt weird if we didn't introduce her to him in chapter 2, this dialogue feels weird as well, and I can't quite understand what he could mean by that if he's not in on the conspiracy. Cause if he isn't, then why would he say that some of his family members are full of bad surprises? In my opinion, it makes him way more sus. But that's it when it comes to new evidence. Now let's talk about some points that didn't hold up quite well. In the original video, I talked about this secret scene of ASGORE talking to some old friend. I assumed it had to refer to Rudy. Now we know it was probably about Flowery, but who knows. It could go both ways. Flowery is a parallel to Rudy anyways, similarly to how Ralsei is a parallel to Azrael. The worst thing is everything we learned about the first Dark World. We know it was opened by the knight because the black shard ASGORE had was left at the original scene. I assumed that Rudy is the knight because Des fell into the depths and he wanted to get her out of there, which is supported by the dialogue hidden in the code. The new dialogue from that someone in chapter 5 confirms it is Des. She's heavily connected to the whole don't forget thing, and the scratching proves that she's in there during the events of the game. This makes it pretty obvious that the tragedy that happened in the first Dark World was that Des disappeared in it and fell into the depths, where there's complete nothingness and we're the only ones that can read her thoughts by breaking the game. So if that's the case, if Des disappeared after the knight opened the first Dark World, then why would the knight do it if they were Rudy? I can't think of a single thing, as the whole conspiracy feels like a way to get Des out of there. So why did they open it in the first place? That's the first actual flaw of Rudy Knight, but then again, I can't see anybody, and I mean anybody, choosing to make the first Dark World, as that's just completely pointless. But hey, if it is Rudy, that's a really cool dynamic between him and ASGORE. We know they were best friends, but drifted apart after Des disappeared. Rudy might have to hide what he did from ASGORE, as he knows how much his friend blames himself for it, and how much he wants to serve justice to the one that opened the first Dark World. That's why Rudy tries his best to fix his mistake, to get his daughter out of there even if it kills him. He's not only doing it for himself and for Des, but also for ASGORE. If he was the one that opened the first Dark World, regardless of the reason for that, it would make his motivation to rescue Des even stronger. Maybe that's why Rudy had to kidnap ASGORE, so he wouldn't go after him anymore and let him fix things on his own. Also, I just really like the fact that ASGORE wants to kill the knight and parade their body all around town, completely oblivious to it being his best friend. Imagine how devastated ASGORE would be to learn the truth. Not nearly as much as if it was Des under the mask, or Carol, or basically anyone except Rudy and one of the dreamers. So yeah, put that way, I think Rudy Knight still is a great theory, even if it has that missing piece about why would Rudy open the first Dark World in the first place. Well, tell me your thoughts. I think chapter 5 makes Rudy Knight way more interesting, giving him a stronger motivation and an interesting dynamic with ASGORE. Always bet on Rudy Knight, but if it isn't him, then dear Vessel, I always believed in you. Thanks for watching, make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss more Deltarune content. I'm working my ass off on these videos, so any type of support is greatly appreciated. If you want to support me additionally, you can do that via the super thanks option and memberships. I'd really appreciate that. Anyways, until the next one, and...
Did everybody get a lot of candy for Halloween?
Man, shut the fuck up!